Welcome to the CPC meeting of September 24th, 2024. We'll start out by doing a roll call and then we'll get onto the agenda. I'm Burton Flint, chair, and I'm going to go in order. You're on my screen. I'll call you out. So, Bill, you're next.
Okay.
You would just announce yourself and say what committee you represent.
Sure. I'm Bill Cremeza, representing Natural Resources Commission.
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Paul.
Paul Bohm, Recreation Commission appointee.
Sue.
Sue Felshen, representing the Planning Board.
Thank you. John.
John Kratzley, Select Board appointee.
Eve.
Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Nancy.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission.
Thank you very much, all. We have this is the meeting where we kick off our busy season. And we've got a pretty full agenda tonight, and I'm going to try to keep things. Oh, wonderful! And once more, Diane, if you would introduce yourself and state your appointment basis.
I'm sorry, Diane Proctor, Select Board. So glad to see everybody.
So nice to see you, Diane. All right, so we've got a pretty full agenda. In some respects, it's going to be shorter than I was expecting based upon the number of applications we've received, but we also have a lot of other items to get through. And so I think I'm going to refer to the agenda, which I've now moved away from on my screen. I think that the first item was to look at the and keep me honest here. The first item was to look at the applications and talk about assigning applications to committee members. Is that right? And
that is correct. Review of new applications, assign members to applications, and then two other items under that main item.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And you've just grabbed the screen. You're showing the the overview of applications. So obviously we have a remarkably small number of applications, and maybe our select board appointee or select board liaison will fill us in, but I suspect that there's some focus going on at the town level in terms of what departments are submitting applications this cycle, based upon feedback from FinCom in the last funding cycle. Though we also don't have any applications from non-town groups. So it's a very short list, which means our Saturday is going to be pretty truncated. One of my I think my favorite part of being on CPC. I was looking at this and I realized that the Saturday is also Kicks for Cancer, which is a very busy day for some people in town and for the town. And but I realized we'll probably be done in about an hour's time, given that I think only 3 of these require site visit or deserve a site visit. So just going through these, we've got another request like we had last year from the Housing Trust of sort of an open-ended, not specific to a particular project, but rather to the mission of the Housing Trust, $740,000. We've got the standing RESO request or $43,500 to support that program. We've got a couple of interesting open space projects, $500,000 for the Thoreau School, open space and recreation areas, and then a follow-on for some planning at the Giroux Recreation Area, a historic preservation survey, which I'm sure Ann can tell us all about, digitization of some assessors' records, and then the standing staff request, though that it's I believe somewhat larger this year. And if I'm not mistaken, the only 3 of the so first let me ask the question: do we think it's worthwhile to assign these out to committee members to shepherd? In the past, when we've had 15 to 20 applications, we've broken it down into having 1 or 2 or 3 members assigned to each application so that we could have some focused questions and we could sort of break it up. Diane, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Bert. Now, I don't think so. I mean, of course, I'm speaking as someone who's been on the committee for a long time, so I have familiarity. you know, with these, you know, applications, but I think that as a whole, it would be lovely for all of us to be able to cover all of them. Because I think there's not so many that we can't, but that's just my instinct. And, but I'm happy if you think we should be dividing it up, that's also terrific.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that input. Anybody else have any thoughts on this? Paul?
Yeah, I just have a question regarding recusal. So on the Giroux, so I'm on the Recreation Commission, and certainly we have discussed, and you know, I was involved in the creation of the application. I reviewed it. I'm not the applicant. That's the chair of the Recreation Commission, and I don't know whether that warrants a recusal or you know, no
Not in my
personal-
view. Not in my view. My view is you recuse yourself if you have a personal stake in a particular project. We always have, I mean, well, more than half the committee is made up of people representing different committees
Right.
that I think oftentimes have been part of or reviewed part of this process. I mean, Nancy, I'm thinking about you and historic preservation, things like that. So
Yeah.
Paul, I wouldn't think that was the case unless you felt that you had a personal stake in this outcome, like you had a boat you wanted to launch at Giroux Park. And
Well,
Yeah.
I do have a kayak, but I don't think I have a personal stake. I have
Well,
a
you can
personal,
do that already.
I have a personal interest, but also I have kids in throw school. Probably more of a personal interest there.
yeah,
Well, I think that is covered by a large proportion of the town has the same personal interest.
Yeah.
yeah, and
That's
it's
diluted
and
me.
we've looked at that before, actually. Maybe in part, Sue, I know you asked for some review on recusal of something matters in the past, and it's if you've got a generalized stake that's roughly equivalent to other citizens of the town in something. So, for example, and Paul, I'm going to guess when you talk about kids at the throw school, you're talking about your grandkids.
Yes.
Okay.
How quickly I forget grandkids.
I think
Um,
that's probably in line with sort of a generalized interest of other members of the
Sure.
citizenry of Concord.
Okay,
Nancy,
I just want to
I-
raise that. Yeah.
I recall, when the national park had something before CPC, I did recuse myself from the voting.
and was that when
on
you
that.
were employed with the National Park Service?
No, it was after I was retired. I
Huh,
wouldn't have
okay.
needed to, but we always operated under the concept of the appearance of a conflict or an appearance of wrongdoing. So I'm just saying that as another example. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think that's what, Paul being on the Recreation
No,
Commission rises to. And of course,
No.
we also have Judge Crassley's great prior example of recusing himself from any of the Wright Tavern and First Paris discussions.
Yeah.
But good
I-
question.
yeah.
Yes, Diane.
Yeah, I think that in fact, we all have an interest in these projects. That's partly why we're serving on CPC. It's partly why we care about it, is because we are connected to the town. We are connected to the issues that are central to the town's discourse and dialogue. And so, I mean, I
Yeah.
think in that sense, that we perhaps each carry a certain bias, but I think those biases are not ones that would cause us to have to excuse ourselves from
No.
discourse. So,
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
pretty much out there.
yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think that goes to sort of that you're similarly situated as other members of the town on those issues. You don't have I'm trying to sort of from memory refer back to the standard that the Attorney General's office provided on recusal. And I think and Mary,
It's 10%. If you're part of 10% of the people in town that benefit, then you recuse yourself. But if more than, so it's, if 10% of the people in town benefit from something and I'm part of that 10%, then I need to recuse myself. But I think for the things that you're looking at, more than 10% of the people in town will benefit. So that's
Okay.
the hurdle. Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so my view on this is when I look at these projects, we've got 7 projects. two of them we see every year after year, so I don't think anybody's going to have any particular new questions. One of them we're
Right.
quite familiar with, which is the housing production plan implementation. That we had lots of discussion with on last year.
Yeah.
What we're really talking about is 4 projects. I don't think we need to divvy this up amongst the committee members. I think we should all feel willing to ask questions, raise hands when we have the applicants before us, and ask questions when we do the site visits. That's my view.
Yep.
Is all
I
in,
agree.
informally all in favor? Okay.
Yeah.
So then if we talk about the schedule for Saturday, and when I saw that in the agenda, caught me off guard. I've been out of the loop. So the 28th, so this Saturday we've got that. And Anne, if I can ask you to weigh in terms of what time we would be meeting up. And my assumption was that we would be going to the Thoreau School, we would be going to Giroux, and we would be going to the assessor's office. But is there anything, is that it?
Right, so those are the 3 I was thinking.
Can't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry, those are the 3 that I was also thinking you would be interested in seeing. So Dr. Hunter said that she asked me to ask you all if you could possibly visit during the week rather than a Saturday.
Oh,
Visit during the week at the Thoreau School?
At the Thoreau School, or maybe you just want to visit without.
I don't think we need Dr. Hunter there if that's the case. I don't think we're going to get us all there on a Saturday. And I also think, especially given that we are remote generally, I think it's great for us all to get together on a Saturday together.
Yeah.
So I would, as much as I respect Dr. Hunter's time, I would say no. But if she wanted to have somebody else represent her, such as, is it Justin Wade, who's the principal, or that may be another Justin? Names in my mind. Somebody else from the Thoreau School to represent Dr. Hunter, we would be perfectly understanding. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yep, I agree.
I'll work on that. I know Nate Smith from the archives, he said 9 o'clock would work for him. And the Giroux, the person who applied for Giroux, he said he wasn't able to make it, but he would reach out to his team to see who could represent the project.
Okay.
That morning. And I know John Kratzley asked for an early morning start, right? I don't know if you're thinking about 8 o'clock.
Here we go again, Burton.
Yeah, it's not with such a few number, it's really not necessary. We used to start at 8, but we could start at 9 at the
At the
townhouse.
archives.
Yeah.
And who I know likes to sleep in has her thumbs up. I'd be perfectly happy to start at 9 at the, and is it the townhouse or is it at the assessor's office?
It would be actually at the library.
At the library. Oh,
Yeah.
so downstairs at the library. Oh, one of my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
places. Okay. So let's plan on starting there, and then we can head over to West Concord. And boy, I sure hope somebody from Rec can show up and help us with the Giroux to explain what they're doing. When they say they can't make it, but they're hoping to get somebody from their office, I would say get somebody from their office or withdraw their application if they're not going to work with us, right? I mean, really, it's part of the process.
Yeah, that's right.
We will have questions that are best answered while we've got eyes on the ground. And then however you want to schedule that, since Thoreau and Giroux are essentially more or less adjacent, that's fine. And I bet we're wrapped up by if we start at 9, and we'll be wrapped up by 10:30 in the morning, probably.
That'd be great.
That's good because my daughter's kicks game starts at 10.
We will, well, you know what? We will be done by
Definitely.
9:30 then, Eve. I'm just going to commit to that.
We
So,
now have a specific goal. That's wonderful.
And I want to get over there and watch that. It's one of my other favorite Concord activities.
is that 3 visits? Do I have that right?
You've 3 visits,
Okay,
right?
thank
Yeah.
you. I'll just double
Yeah.
check.
Okay. And while I've been talking, I was hoping to pull back up my agenda, but Anne, can you then direct me to the next item on the agenda? Because, well, I've got multiple
Discuss
applications
letters
all
of
open.
support as needed.
Right, and actually, there was also a schedule for upcoming individual interviews. Typically, those are spread out over 3 meetings. I think it was last year, it was spread out over 3 meetings, but maybe this year, it's really just one evening.
I mean, last year we had what, like 18 applications, so we needed 3 evenings. This year, like I said, we really only have, I think, probably 4 applications that we're going to be digging into. The 3 that were just discussed for site visits, and I'm going to guess people will have some questions around the Concord Affordable Housing Trust application. I think we could get it accomplished in an evening. Diane?
In the Concord Affordable Housing Trust Fund, they talk about the recovery of some funds. And a couple of years ago, we discovered that in order to recover funds that had not been spent, we had to go to a town meeting in a double layered procedure. The first was to free those funds and give them back to us. Do you all remember this? And
Yeah,
then
of
the
course.
second one was to be able to then issue resources to go forward. So I hope we can examine that one pretty carefully. For, we may not be visiting a site on that one, we're not, but the process.
Process. Yeah.
One of the things we then discovered was we maybe didn't have to do that. So I think we need an adjudication of that process again. So I think it's important for us to think that through and get some wise advice.
And let me just ask about that. So you're referring to it was about, I think, $240,000. It was
That's right.
for the Commonwealth Avenue property. So have we not already previously had that returned to us and accept? So do we need to take action to redirect that at this point?
I couldn't tell what, Anne, can you help us with that?
I think so. You did close it out last fiscal year. So I believe that it would become available on July 1st, 2025.
Okay.
Double check with finance. So I don't think you need to go through any additional procedure.
Yeah, and Diane, I think the scenario you were thinking about where we had the overlapping fiscal year versus sort of our operational year, and we needed to pull it out. But Paul, I'm guessing you had your hand raised to either confirm or correct.
Yeah, I thought that money was in reserve, which means
Right.
we can spend it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But Diane, thank you very much for raising that point, because boy, that was a
complicated.
we don't want to call a special town meeting to get our hands on that money, for sure. Okay. So let's see. We've established a schedule for the reviews. Discuss letters of support as may be needed. Not exactly certain how we drive that discussion. We've got several letters of support already for the housing trust that have been included in that package. And maybe Diane, with your experience, like as an agenda item for this meeting in September, have we looked at whether there's particular applications we feel need a boost with a letter of support, or?
Well, my recollection is, and it's not, these things are not, they are imperfect, but my recollection is that we've asked for additional letters of support as we've interviewed someone and felt that there was a reason why we needed other people or other organizations to weigh in and support something. We couldn't always learn that from just from reading about it.
Right. Of course.
So, I mean, I think that's when we ask them, at that point, I think in the discourse, we say, well, we have you asked so-and-so to support you? Have you turned to such and such? It would be helpful to hear from such and such. And so in that discourse and dialogue, I think we have suggested letters of support through that kind of collaborative conversation. But help me if I'm wrong. And
isn't there a deadline for those letters of support that might get in the way of that process that you're thinking about, Diane? They may need to have them in earlier.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
They're due on November 15th, and I was asked to sort of shepherd this around the town. There were issues last year with certain projects that where a nonprofit was applying for a project on town land. you know, that's come up a few times.
Yeah, yeah,
And
sure.
so, now the town is looking at its own internal process, and it would like, you know, so I sent all of the applications to Megan Zamudo, the assistant, or the deputy town manager, and she is sending it out to the senior management team to review. So for example, you know, the Recreation Commission application would typically need the signature of the Director of Recreation to be a co-signer or have some sort of letter of support to go along with it.
And did that not have,
I didn't look quite carefully, I'm sorry.
who is a signer on that then? Um,
I
sorry,
think it was the chair of the Recreation Commission,
okay.
so it probably needs a signature.
I think you're right. I was surprised by that. So
Yeah.
I also, and Paul, yeah, you've got your hand raised.
No, on the timing of this and letters of support, you raised the issue of signature. I agree that Lee Jackson has to sign that, but are we doing interviews before the letters of support are due? When do the letters of support due, Anne? Is that
November 15th?
November?
Yeah.
And when are we scheduling our interviews? Is that before that or after that?
Should be before that, right?
Yeah, so the letters of support really need to come. I know I've been asked about that, and people are looking at the November 15th. So I think we need to, if they're submitted, they should probably come in before we have the interviews, right?
Right.
I'm of a slightly different perspective. Nancy, help me on this, because I think with the Right Tavern, for instance, when we were working with them, we turned to them and said, we think you need other letters. And so we had them do it. I mean, I think that if we're talking about letters of support from the town, like the Recreation Department, that's one thing. That's almost a rigueur. But when we come across a project that we think would be more robust if it were supported, I think that's part of what our due diligence is to say that to someone. What do you think, Nancy? Am I right?
I'm not remembering it exactly as additional letters of support as much as I'm remembering we asked for a lot more specific information, and maybe that required other people to weigh in. Unless you have something more specific in mind. I know that the Historical Commission wanted to see a lot more information, and maybe that resulted in a letter from somebody. I don't have an exact memory.
Well, I'm just simply, I was using it as an example of something where we felt like there needed to be more robust, you're exactly right. We asked them to flesh out their application.
Yes, we did.
Yes, to flesh out their application a little more fully, but
Yes,
what came with that were letters of support. I think November 1st is ample time for people. And I also
I have a question for you. Is it possible in this process that the committee could simply be asking other entities in town, if not for a letter, at least to inquire their position on something?
Mhm.
And would that happen? Could that happen after the November deadline for a letter of support?
Oh, maybe.
Well, it's a good question. We could get sort of varying levels of feedback, right? So we get in the past where we have been oversubscribed in terms of the applications exceeding our funding, we always go to the select board and we ask for their feedback on their views on projects and so forth. I think as we're looking at this deliberative process, what Diane referred to was sort of a process where somebody's coming forward with an application and we're not sure whether it's something that the town actually wants, but the town's got to be involved in.
Right.
And so we've said, hey, is a town bought into this as well? Or maybe one department versus another and the like. But here we are, if we said by November 1st, well, I guess maybe I would like to stop and say, which of our projects that are on the agenda do we think need a letter of support? Because I look at it and there's two that jump out at me, and it seems like perfectly reasonable to say, hey, in the next 5 weeks, can you get us a letter to confirm that this is a project you're on board with, essentially, that you've considered, and we won't have finalized our funding approval by the time we get that if we set November 1 as a deadline. Eve?
So the
Yeah, I-
commission would ask for more input from specific parties? Is that what you just said?
Well, I just think that I think there's two projects that I see that I just would want to see that the recreation department is on board with.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
And
But,
the other, and the other?
I was gonna say that I think the two projects you're talking about are Giroux and Thoreau, which don't have any letters of support.
Yeah.
right, and the Thoreau one coming from the public schools, I want to see that it's billed as a recreation department project, and I want to see that the recreation department thinks that's a good use of recreation funds. And similar, well, I don't want to open the whole discussion on the Giroux Park. There's lots of issues there, but I would want to see that the recreation department's on board with that since they own that project.
And- Oh,
Yeah,
Diane, if I can ask you to hold, I'm going to go to Paul, who's got his hand raised. And yeah,
yeah, I think on Giroux, I think other support from related entities like Warner's Pond Task Force, and I think it's important. I know that project
that's a great.
for a while, and I think Giroux is not an uncontroversial project in its current completion state. So I think in addition to the recreation director, now does she have to sign it, or can she just write a letter? She's not the owner of the property. That's Carrie. Because she asked me, Lee Jackson, if she had to sign it, and I said, I don't know, but maybe she does. Yeah.
Sign the application. Well, I mean, that is a good question. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't look at who was the signatory on the application.
Harry did sign it.
Carrie signed it, and the chair of the Recreation Commission signed it. But
right.
since the Recreation Commission doesn't control the property, it's one of these interesting town things. But I'm sure she'll sign it if we ask her to.
I mean, and I'm sorry because I don't know all the names and the roles, but Carrie is is that our new
Carrie
department
LaFleur,
director?
Carrie LaFleur, town manager.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie LaFleur. Oh, I do know who Carrie LaFleur is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would expect that the recreation department, the director of the recreation department would be signing on, if
Sure.
not directly onto the application, at least through a letter saying that they were on board with the project.
I agree. Yeah.
Sue.
I was wondering if on Giroux, it seems it would also behoove the project to get support from ORS.
From ORS.
I mean, it's not necessary, but it seems like that would help their proposal. Since ORS has taken an interest, at least some members of ORS have taken an interest in what's going on with Warner's Pond.
They have, and though they are also, I think, represented on the task force.
Oh, are they? Excuse me, I overlooked that.
I'm not certain about that. I know some of the people on that task force, they're connected to ORS, but I don't know for
Well,
certain if ORS has a.
Bill's
seat
is
at the table.
co-chair of the task force.
Yeah,
so.
Bill can tell us.
There we go.
Yeah. So I want to say two things about that. Yes, there is someone, and that vote for a letter of support should come up at our meeting on Thursday. And I
Okay.
anticipate that'll pass. Also, the Natural Resources Commission voted at their last meeting to write a letter of support for the Giroux property.
Oh,
So
good.
the Giroux project. So that'll be coming along too.
Okay, that's great. So if I can bring this together a little bit, I think, Diane, yeah, I'm sorry.
I would, it is that project in particular, Burton, that I was thinking about. I mean, I think they're going to need robust support from a variety of committees. And because of the way in which, and they might even turn to MCI committee that's doing that study, because it's going to abut that property, and there may be reasons why. A discourse with MCI would be not, that study committee might not be unimportant, so.
It's a good point as well, Diane. Thank you. So Anne, I think let's break this down into, I think, with respect to letters of support, let's talk about Giroux first. And I do think it makes sense to ask the recreation department if they would evidence their support. I also think, for the reasons Paul noted and Diane was alluding to, it would be really good to have the task force sign on. And Bill, thanks for that as well. Just not essentially, in part, to know that it's part of the deliberations they're doing and the sort of the space they've got to consider the pond, that they think that this isn't short circuiting anything that we're right. And then I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on Diane that the MCI task force cadence in terms of and their focus. I mean, I know that that they might have time to focus on the impact to Duro nearby, but I just it would be nice to get a letter from them, but I don't think we need to insist upon it. That would be my view.
Well, I don't thank you, Burton. I don't think we have to insist on it at all, but it would be nice to make sure that they've at least touched base with them.
Okay.
Because I know MCI is eyeing that whole property and that whole area. And so I
Yeah.
think therefore just being reassured that they've had some discussion
Okay.
with the MCI committee.
Okay. Paul.
Diane, I'm not so sure about the MCI committee. It would be nice, but I think Public Works, Alan Cathcart's group should sign on that. I know that there've been discussions. I know there was concern that anything more to row it would require more maintenance. I know that's why if you look at the application, there's a maintenance plan put in there at Alan's request. So I think we should ask Alan, if he supports the application to indicate so thus, because I think that was an important point for a number of people. Can something be proposed to Drew that might or might not increase the maintenance costs? And I think that's why that item is in the application. So I think that would be helpful.
Paul, I've got a really ignorant question, but is it true that then Public Works is responsible for the park maintenance? It's not the rec department?
Oh, yeah, it's Public Works. Rec department doesn't maintain anything.
Okay. Well, boy,
Seriously.
public.
No,
Well,
Public
if
Works
it's not within their scope, that's not within their scope, right?
Public Works maintains all the fields, all the basketball courts, all the properties. There's no maintenance in the in recreation department, although in the future I think recreation will be paying for it through their revolving fund. So
interesting.
Yeah,
well,
so,
the Duro Park presents some interesting maintenance considerations for sure.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so Anne, do you have a list for Duro then?
Yes, so
Of people we'd like to.
the applicant and share the list.
Okay.
Letters of support that the committee would like.
Okay, and then the other one that jumped out at me was the Thoreau application. It is presented as a recreation funding request. I'd want to make sure that recreation thinks it's a good use of recreation funds. I also wonder potentially, and this is just my mind kind of wandering, but whether natural resources would have a say in it. There's that property at Thoreau backs up to the
Assabet River.
The Assabet River, and there's an informal trail. Well, there's a portion of it is a formal trail, and then it peters into an informal trail that's hemmed in by some fencing that's part of the school fencing right now. And it would just be interesting to see if NRC had wanted to weigh in at all on this in the scope of the project.
That's a very good question. I looked at the maps and I was a little concerned thinking about the NRC, but that's a good point, and we can bring it up at our next meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I know that there's been sort of an effort for a long time to create a loop trail along the Assabet, and it's really constrained right there against the chain link fence and the edge of the drop off. Paul,
would it make sense to ask the Thoreau PTG for letters of support? I mean, they're the beneficiaries, yeah.
They very much would be. I think that would be great. The Thoreau PTG, I'm sure the principal would be able to facilitate getting that, and if going through there. Okay, were there any other projects that people thought? I mean, potentially, and Anne, I will confess, it's the one application I didn't open, but I think it's yours. The assessment of the historic structures of modern buildings in town. whether historic, Nancy, if you think there would be a letter of support there.
I think that'd be a great idea. I think
Okay.
the commission already supports that idea.
Okay. So one more.
The applicants, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd be willing to provide a letter of support.
That'd be an easy one.
Dan.
It's a great project, by the way.
Yeah, I think Lee Smith, she says, I think Lee Smith might want to submit a letter for the Concord Housing Trust Fund money. I mean, it would be nice to have the adjacent committees that they're receiving money from and working with them to just hear from them and have their support in evidence.
I
Because-
think
And
he did.
I think he
There is
Oh, he
did.
already did?
Yeah,
Okay.
we had one from each of the 3 adjacent committees. And so
Fantastic.
that was on there.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't see that, and that's my
No.
bad.
Well, it was such a thorough application. You had to get about to page 32 to see Lee Smith's letter, but it was there. Yeah.
You are
Um,
kind. I thought I read it all, but I guess I didn't. So
John.
This is just a general question. I mean, apart from our suggesting to groups or virtually telling them what letters, the groups are all encouraged to get their own, I gather. I mean,
Right.
there's no,
Right.
I hope, Ann, they've all, they know in the application process that they can get letters from anybody they want.
Yeah, they do.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
it's such an experienced group applying this year. I mean,
It really is. Yeah,
it
we
really
have very
is. I
few
mean,
people that need to be
very-
walked through it.
That's right.
Okay, so Anne, I think you've got your list of people to reach out to, of things of people we would like to hear from. It's by no means, a requirement that they provide it, but it would be nice to hear that. I would say recreation on those 2 projects would be essential to hear that they're in support of those. Moving on to the next, we've already covered the schedule for the Saturday site visits. The item 4, project status update, CP2 and CP3 annual reports were submitted. I think those are the reports that you file, and correct me if I'm wrong, those go to the state, right? That's to show what our prior year funding, is that what those reports are?
They want to know which projects are active. So all of the new projects that were approved at last annual town meeting are in the report, plus any projects that were closed out. I report on that too. And then that's the CP3 report. And then the finance committee does the other report.
Okay. And I think there was some question about some discrepancy in prior year's numbers in terms of how we were accounting for how much was going to affordable house or community housing versus not. There was an email thread on that, and I think I read it while I was on an airplane somewhere, and I didn't really delve into it. Can you shed some light on that? I know that Keith Bergman had come back with some concerns.
Right. We haven't heard back yet from the finance committee or finance division.
Okay.
I think that right, there may have been internal information that we used in the past. This year I went to the state reporting and I just, pulled all the information from the state coalition website.
Okay.
There was the discrepancy between our internal numbers and their numbers, but I think Keith pointed out that there may have been some years missing on the state.
Okay.
Website, so that could account for it, but we haven't really received confirmation from the finance division.
And the impact for the rest of the committee, to be clear, it means that the way we were representing the allocation as on a percentage basis in our town meeting presentations didn't necessarily exactly align with what we had reported to the state. And that may have been a difference between our internal numbers versus what was getting reported, but that didn't affect actually what was being provided to particular projects, right?
Right.
It was just essentially in the town meeting presentation that when we had said 34% goes to community housing or not. Okay, so if I guess just keep me apprised of that. That would be be great.
We have accurate numbers from year to year, but it's the cumulative numbers that, you know, there are questions about just because it has been around for so long.
Okay. And then but I think that this agenda item opens up the door to a consideration of the status of various projects. We've got the spreadsheet or at least the table of various projects. And I was a little confused so let's move to discussing the status of various projects based upon their spin down, and we can talk about status reports as well. We've got a long list of those that I'm not sure if they were discussed at prior meetings or if that's for tonight. But as a starting point, I was a little confused. When I went to the website and I was pulling down documents in preparation for tonight, there was a active projects FY24 Q4 corrected and an FY25 July 1, 2024 corrected. I'll be honest, I couldn't tell the difference. Can you tell us
Right.
what the difference is between those two?
Yes. So, well, I guess you don't need to see the screen. So the end of the fiscal year, FY24 included the projects that were closed out. It didn't yet include any of the projects, any of the new projects that had just been approved at annual town meeting.
Okay.
So
for tonight, if we wanted to do a review to get a sense of projects that were lagging or what, should we look at the one that had it was a 2025 report, because the closed out projects we don't really need to focus on? Is that fair?
yes, I
Okay.
just hoped to always give you quarterly financials.
Okay.
So it's good to have the year-end reports just for your own.
Okay.
Sorry, Siri is, without me asking, talking to me. So just sitting here and she's suddenly chatting. So I apologize.
That's the background dialogue to my life. Siri butting in to my thoughts. Okay, so thank you, Diane, for posting this up on the screen. I guess I'll open shall we go through this line by line, or does that make sense?
I think we almost have to.
Okay.
Because
it's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and I also I don't want to bring this up out of order. So you help me if I'm way out of order. I'm really concerned about the money that we've given to Delia for dredging. Where that money is right now, is it, and to what degree are people expecting to use it, and for what are they expecting to use it? I don't know that we're going to be able to answer that. I don't imagine we shall tonight, but I do make
it's
sure
worth a discussion.
we can really be aware of that, because I think it's a big issue.
Okay.
If you want, I can respond a little bit to that, because it's been, or do you want to wait till later?
Bill, if I can ask, how about we go through it line by line?
Sure,
I think
that sounds fun.
honestly, a lot of the stuff that's open is going to be within natural resources. I think we're going to get to it, and there's going to be a lot of discussion, but if we just go through it as sort of an orderly so that we make sure we don't leave anything on the list. First of all, administration, I think we're good here, right? The amount that's unencumbered is the amount that was granted last year that just hasn't been transferred over. We've got the affordable housing buy down. It's an interesting thing as we think about the request this year. So this is the Concord Housing Development Corporation that's previously requested some buy down funds. And I think, frankly, they can't afford to do a buy down with $238,000. And they need some more funds to be able to make that happen. So it's kind of been banked, which makes, I don't draw any particular conclusions, but it makes me wonder, think about do you put all the money in the trust bucket so that the trust can swing a bigger, a basket of money around when opportunities arise, or do you put them out, with with the individual stakeholders? It's just interesting. Does anybody have any comments on that one? Paul?
Yeah, it's more of a question. In looking, I don't want to preempt our discussion of Keith's application, but when he talks about that there's previous money committed, and is that the same? And I'm looking at this, it says unencumbered and unspent. Could some of that money actually be committed to various projects but not spent? I'm going to When we
No,
get
I
to
think,
application,
I think, this money, the 233 is not part of Keith's application, right? This is not the return of the 240 for Commonwealth Ave. This was money that was given to the CHDC to have in the bank in the event there was an opportunity to buy down a property.
That's right.
And it's been sitting out there for 4 years. Actually, well, I guess it says FY22, so it was part of an application from 4 years ago. So they've had the money for 3, but they haven't had the opportunity to spend it because, well, houses are expensive, I guess. And so
Burton, I know, but since the consolidation last year with the Housing Trust being the consolidator, Keith is kind of speaking for all the entities, including CHDC, I presume. So when in his application, he talks about committed or uncommitted funds, even though this one predates the consolidation, I'm just trying to wonder, this is sitting out there, obviously, but is it committed or is it uncommitted? We can get to that and talk to Keith about that, but I'm just.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if Keith was talking about this in terms of his discussion on the trust, because this is not trust funds. He doesn't control this. This
Okay.
is CHDC. So when Keith's talking about committed funds, I think he's saying we've committed to fund, for example, the Assabet Bluffs to $1 million, but we've only spent $33,000 on air conditioning so far. But the rest of the $1 million is committed.
Right.
This is funds that is uncommitted. But it's not within the purview of the housing trust.
Okay. But the next one is, right?
The next one is, yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly right. So that's $500,000 that went there. They've spent some, actually, they didn't spend any money here, but they previously spent some money to renovate that one house that was not part of the new construction.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Sue has her hand up. Sue, do you?
Yes, Sue.
Well, I do. It strikes me that this is exactly correct about the CHDC, that this money went to them before we had the trust to consolidate everything. And so unless they were to somehow return it, of course it sits with them. And although it's too much to buy a unit, if they find a unit and need more to buy it, they should be applying to the trust, which should then
Exactly.
be deciding in the appropriate manner, all of them collectively, what happens. So we should never see this kind of line again, because in the future it should sit with the trust. But I don't see any problems with an insufficient amount sitting with the CHDC until they find a way to put it together without any other money to spend it as they should.
I agree with 95% of what you just said.
Which 5% are you wrong about?
Well, the assumption that the trust is the basket going forward. We'll have discussions about that as the fall progresses. And I'm making no judgment there. But also just that it's fine that it sits there. We want the money to be spent. If this was FY 2022, houses are not getting cheaper, which means this money is losing its purchasing power for each year it's sitting there. And so I would start to grow concerned, right? If it's just sitting there banked for a really long time.
Well,
It's
and
losing its
didn't I
purchasing
just
power.
read somewhere in one of the applications maybe that a unit was bought down for $100,000? That seemed like a low number, but maybe 233,000 is enough to buy down one unit.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
yes, Steve.
I think that they have other funding sources as well from the state and from charities and from the 233 might be part of the funding for a buy down, but it's probably legit to just ask them what their plan is for the money.
I
Yeah.
think it's important, actually. I mean, we've been asked to be very specific, have we not? And to make sure we understand what residual monies are being spent or not spent. And so I think that question is important. And John, I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand. I just barged in, so you're ahead of me. Go ahead.
Well, my question is really to Ann. In the last column where it says status report, do they answer the questions we're just discussing? The status just a percentage, or do they say, oh, we're holding this money, waiting for a unit because it's not enough to do a buy down?
Essentially the
they-
latter, John. Essentially, they
learn?
said the latter.
Oh, okay. I mean, we don't see that. We don't know what they're saying. We just
Well,
see,
so we had a report, and I think they were. I think it essentially said we're waiting for a property that we could use this on.
okay.
I'm sure Lee would say, if the right property came along and they were short, they would be going to the trust and asking for funding. Yeah. I guess, okay, and we've got a whole lot of line items to get through here. This one, I'm just looking at, it's beginning to age. It's beginning to raise a little bit of concern I can feel from the committee in terms of, okay, let's make sure that this money is put to good use, and we might have some questions in the future. The next line item, this is the Assabet River Bluff housing. There's a big chunk of it that hasn't been spent because it's going through a complex planning process. They've done some renovations. I don't have any concerns about this one. Does anybody have any concerns, any follow-up?
No, it's exciting what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's in planning. The next one, actually, well, it's NA, I'm not sure. That's $1 million. And this one's NA across the boards. What does that mean? That it's just transferred to the trust, but so we're not expecting a status?
Right, I mean, we're expecting the annual report from them that goes to.
Okay.
But yes, that's a transfer, so it's really not, it's not on your books anymore, it's on their books.
Okay, and that's an interesting thing. So I guess if we're continuing to track how this money is being put to use, and so far, based upon what they've been reported to us by the trust, they are putting their money to good use. They're not sitting on a mountain of money. Where we would need to look for updates is in that annual report. Okay. RESO program, this is a standard. It's a transfer over each year. They're not banking the money.
Actually, I have an administrative question about the
Yep.
last two lines on this page, which is, I think last year we decided that it was too confusing to non-insiders reading this report to understand what pending means. So on the first line, you can see that it says pending 0% complete under housing. Did we decide? I thought we decided to add 0% complete to all of the ones that say pending. So there's a whole lot then that should also say 0% complete to explain the pending, including these two lines.
Bring that out, so the new projects, I forgot to add 0% complete, but I will do
Okay.
that.
Sure.
Thank you, Sue. All right. Yeah, that's good. I did struggle a little bit to understand the different categorization. Okay. And if you could scroll up so we can see the next page thank you very much. All right. So the next one, Assabet Pedestrian Bridge. This one was interesting. There was, let me just break this down. There's still a fair bit of money sitting there, but if anybody read the status report, it was because our amazing planning department had gotten a state grant that supported a lot of this work, and the state grant funding had to be spent first. So this is essentially being spent on the latter part of the planning and development process for this bridge, and that same logic applies to all three of these things, which were all sort of broken down over the period of 3 years. A total of, what is that, $750,000 for the planning and development of that bridge. I personally am satisfied that this money is being put to good use, having leveraged a state grant in the first instance, and now being lined up. And maybe, Anne, if you've got an update on this, of whether it's in TIP funding and whether that's proceeding now. I think the status reports referred to decisions being made in July, but maybe that was out of date. Do you know?
Let's,
And if you don't know,
of course, I think I did, right when they were received. I know that Elizabeth, I think, has a grant application due to the state in the next few days. I think she said it's due September 30th or something, so.
okay. And that grant application would be, well, so we're getting into the 25% design here with these, and then from 25% design, that's when the state sort of takes it over and comes up with a construction funding, right? So is there additional grant applications, or would we expect to see them coming back to CPC to get to 100% design, or what would be the town's obligation? Do you know?
Right, you'd have to ask Elizabeth.
Okay, all right. But at any rate,
She did
the
have-
reason there's money still sitting here is because we benefited from a state grant. that needed to be spent first. Anybody have any questions on these three?
I just want to say how clever that was, because we were told by Elizabeth long ago that this, Marcia actually, who said, we have to apply for the state grant first. In order, we have to get in the line, in the queue, so that we can get the money. And now the money's forthcoming. I think it's really exciting, actually.
It's lovely to see that long-term vision and approach, and sometimes it just comes down to administrative diligence, right? I point out that if anybody's had a chance to go down the Bruce Freeman Trail through Sudbury, it's lovely, and that Marcia is having a second act getting that trail built for the town of Sudbury, or helping with the final stages there. The next one, Bruce Freeman Trail. Speaking of, these are sorts of the sort of pots and pans requests that were originally put up by Marcia on various different things. Some of these things relating to sorting out conflict between, I think it's the third one, between pedestrians and bicyclists in the Junction Park. These are not particularly old. It seems like the spending is moving along. Anne, is there anything you want to report here?
No, I just got an email today that they're looking into maybe using some of that for trees.
For trees on the trail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul.
That
My question maybe is to Anne, is sort of with Marcia's departure, who's actually spearheading the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail set of projects?
Right, that's Elizabeth Hughes.
Elizabeth, okay.
Town planner. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Board, I think, no longer exists since the rail trail is complete. But so Elizabeth is working on those projects.
Right. And I mentioned that because I think at the last select board meeting, I think it was mentioned something about that relates to that bottom line burden, that what was originally conceived for that Junction Park safety improvements no longer feasible. So I just was wondering what's the next, and you say Elizabeth probably is on top of that. That's
when you say no longer feasible, that they don't want to consider reconstructing that park.
I'm not sure what the details were, but there was, and there weren't many details, but there was a mention, I think, I forgot who mentioned it, that had to be rethought a little bit. So I think they are still thinking about how to do that, but it's changed. I just want to make sure that we have a champion, and it sounds like Elizabeth's the champion with all the other things she's doing.
Okay. But maybe that's something that's going to sit out there for a little bit, and we would consider that it's not going to get spent because they're not going to proceed with that project.
Well, I think they're going to proceed, but I think the original design, there was going to be a bypass, and that, I know this because my daughter was on the now defunct Rail Trail Committee. But anyway, we should move on. It's just it's fine.
Okay.
well,
Diane,
I just want to say this is another example of something that, that we really need to pursue. And maybe in terms of a second night of people presenting, we need to bring in some of these projects that are up in the air, and ask some of those people to come and actually talk with us about it. So that we can, so that we can reflect due diligence on our part. And so I think maybe if we can then highlight some of these that we really feel we need more information about, which we need more information, I think we should pursue that. I think that's kind of a fiscal responsibility that the town has been asking us to undertake. I don't mean town, I mean the citizens. Yep.
Diane, I think that's a really good year, and maybe this is the year we can do this, because we're not going to need to have 4 months of meetings on applications. And I know we're going to get to Giroux, and there's going to be questions. But if I would say, if we're going to have a sort of we'd like people to come in and provide status updates and explain the project. So far we've identified one person would be Elizabeth Hughes to come in and talk about Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and Junction Park, and I'm sure we're going to get to Delia and the pond as well. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Burton. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, it's a great idea, Diane. So I think that our prioritization will be to get to the applications for this year, but then I honestly think we're going to have we're going to be surprised we come up for air pretty quickly and we can have a meeting that's focused on updates here. All right, Anne, I think we're off this page. So Concord Prison Outreach, this is pending, I guess, 0% complete. I don't recall this particular one. Anne, do you know what's gating this one? Is this it was interesting. I noticed that I'd forgotten this, but one of the prior Bruce Freeman applications had to do with doing the planning and surveying for this project, and then the Concord Prison Outreach was coming in and was the applicant to fund the actual installation of the project. But do you know, is this like waiting on the planning process to be completed?
I know that the procurement procedures are more complicated because it's a nonprofit working on town land, or actually state land with a town easement
Yeah.
on it. So we checked in with others, and there's prevailing wage issues, I guess, because
Okay.
yeah, so it's more complicated than people realized, and it will probably be more expensive than what people realized because of the prevailing wage requirement of the CPC. So
Okay.
yeah.
And I would note that I think that I was looking at the minutes for June in preparation for this meeting, and we were modifying their grant agreement to say that essentially if there was a major change with the cemetery or the like, that we would not disperse the funds. So maybe it's not the end of the world that they're given the current planning process that's going on at MCI that this is taking a little bit longer. Eve.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, which is, when the town meeting approves the dispersal of the funds and presumably they're transferred in June or July, how much do we expect these projects to have used up the funds, or do you have some process of percentage completion by September?
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think what you see is oftentimes the non-town entities move pretty quickly. Some of them are, as we saw, we're hoping to spend the money before we even had town meeting. As you recall that discussion from the spring, they move pretty quickly. I think a lot of times we see these town projects sort of get banked a little bit, which is one of the reasons we're going through this process. Eve, before you joined this committee and we started doing this annual review of these, you'd see some that were 7, 8 years old. The funds hadn't been spent, and some of our predecessor committees did a really good job of cleaning those up and pushing them along. And now, so I didn't see any in here yet. Oh well, we're coming up on
There's
one
one.
from 2015, but most of these are within the last 3, 4 years of funding.
Thank you.
I received an invitation, Burton, from Liz Rust to show the whole cemetery project, to come and look at it and see what's going on. I've been looking at my calendar to try to figure out when it is, but it's sometime in October. So I think they're moving right along on this project.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that boy, I can't find it in my handwritten notes here, but they are moving on this project in a very deliberate way. So
Well, I don't believe I've seen that invite, but if you participate and want to give us an update when you come back to our
I
next meeting.
shall, and I'll try
Okay.
to pull up I'll try to pull up my iPad and see if I can find the note from Liz.
Okay.
Let me go get my iPad. Hold on just a second. Okay.
Okay. The next one I have concerns about, Chamberlain Park. This has been sitting out there since FY22. And I actually walked across this bridge. I think it was last weekend. It is falling down. It's been patched in probably not exactly an ADA compliant manner. It's pretty rickety patch. But the reason I have a concern is it says that they think that the funding for this replacement of the bridge will be in FY 2029. So that this money will have been sitting out there for 7 years at a minimum. I don't know what to say about that.
Well, with inflation, shouldn't we try to recall the money, spend it on something else and have them reapply later?
I kind of, I mean,
No,
It-
it's for a survey. I mean, it isn't for the actual work. It's just, I'm surprised they haven't moved it along. They could have,
well, and Bill, you actually raised a really good point. I think Delia in the update said that they were going to get this moving in the next year or so, but with anticipation of construction happening in 2029, right? So they do the survey and get it teed up for construction, but it still seems
it does seem, well, yeah.
drawn out.
Where is that?
It's the little park there, right? The parking lot behind what is that? The Bank of America in Concord Center.
Yeah, it's,
But
Middlesex, and yeah.
well, it's
Middlesex
next
Bank.
to, well, it's also, yeah, and it's also next to, the Christian Science Building, the Christian Science Church. If
It's a-
off Lowell Road. If you
It's
walk
yeah,
past
it's a
Chamberlain Park, you see it.
the little
Okay.
cut through from Lowell to Kai's.
Right.
And I walked through there. I was with my wife. We were walking around, and I didn't say anything about it. She had no idea that this was a project the committee. And she's like, "Look at this bridge. This is a death trap." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. The town's gonna. This is coming along." And then I saw the update, and I realized, ooh, it's fingers crossed, the thing's got to stand for another 5 years. Paul.
Yeah, so I'm going to put on my taskmaster hat here. So I think our document specifies that the projects money has to be spent within 30 months, unless they get specific dispensation or whatever the language is.
Mhm.
What does this one? Have we given approval for an
No,
extension?
I think at this point, well, I think that the update, and I'm sorry because I'm just working off one screen, so I don't have the update right in front of me. I'm looking at this, what everybody's seeing on their screen. That Delia had said that they were going to get the permitting work done. Was it this summer or next summer? And do you know?
I don't,
Or-
so I could look it up though.
I'm
But-
just looking to see. I've
And
got.
what did it mean to say that the money was received in May of 24? Is that, what is it in the last column? What does that mean?
And can you clarify for that?
No, no, it said the status report was received.
Oh, the
Status.
status report. Okay, I get it now. Okay.
I think this money's been sitting out there at least
Yeah.
since 2022, if not 2021.
Yeah, I think FY22 means they got it in July of 2021. Okay, so they are it's going to start spending funds. It says the July of 2024. So maybe this has been going forward, but I
Couldn't tell, huh?
well, but again, this is design and permitting.
Right.
This would be one so that we can progress through the rest of our agenda items tonight. And I would say would be one we would want to hear more from Delia about when we have
Yeah.
our grantee, or I don't know if you can call them grantees if it's under town MOU, but there are MOUEs come before the committee.
And I'll raise it too with Delia. I'll give her a
Okay.
But just,
I found go ahead, Paul.
no, in the future, this money's been out there for several years, and now it's just getting out as an RFQ.
Yeah.
I understand other things on Delia's plate, but
Mhm.
it's a long time just to get it started.
Yep.
Particularly for something so very visible and really actually pretty useful.
Yeah.
And some of our projects are not as visible. They're more interior and not as as apparent. But this one, so there is a Concord Reformatory Cemetery naming dedication on October 6th from 2 to 4 at the Giroux Pavilion, and it is hosting a naming dedication ceremony on Sunday at the Giroux Pavilion. This event to memorialize the 218 men buried in the prison cemetery by speaking their names aloud and acknowledging their lives. So this is a Concord Prison Outreach Project that I think is in tandem with the effort being done at that cemetery. So that's what I was recalling, and I'll let you know what it's like.
Thank you very much, Diane. Okay, the next one is the middle school fields. Obviously, that's pending, given the ongoing construction there. So no shocks or questions from me on that one. Drinking fountains for Concord playing fields. I'm starting to get the sense that this $2,700 is not going to be spent. The rest of the money was spent quite some time ago. Oh, it says one more to install.
And there was some reason last year why that last one wasn't installed yet, but I can't for the life of me remember what.
You are right,
Drought.
Sue.
There was a new plumbing inspector, and so he had issues with the way the pipes were being laid, so they're still negotiating how that's all gonna work. But-
Okay.
So they did want to hold on to the money. I've asked them.
Okay. All right. So moving along anyway, it's got somebody's attention. We've now got the Giroux Recreation Area improvement. So Giroux Rec, Giroux Park, these two together, $700,000. One's 80%. They're both 80% complete. We could have a lot of discussion on this. Yes, Paul.
I think they're actually more than 80% complete. The final, in fact, in the application, the current application is a report to the select board, which I think speaks to the closeout of Giroux. I think they were waiting on pavers for the pavilion, which is now in there, and a few other things. I think this is just about complete. So
Yeah.
I'd say it's 8% complete, and maybe they have a couple of trees to plant. It's done.
Yeah, and I will say I've visited the site many times over the summer, and real improvements have finally been made. I think it's going to be a maintenance challenge, but it is looking much better. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a direct update from the town manager's office to this committee, and they instead invited us to the select board. But it's moved along, and
I guess we'll
and
see them on our site visit, right?
we will shortly be seeing it. It raises a lot of questions about the new application that we'll get into on another night, but at least for me personally. So, but it seems like it's finally being wrapped up.
Yeah, the responsible people, DPW and Steve Dukran, the town engineer, has been managing that. So he's the firsthand information on exactly what's going on there.
Okay.
But it is, you'll see, I think it is complete. And interestingly, that select board presentation, which was pulled, and Mary knows about this because it wasn't complete at the time when it was on the select board agenda, is actually in the package. So you can see where it is, but I think you'll see it's large. I think it's complete.
Do you want an update
Yeah,
from
sure.
what we're hearing at the select board? The town manager gives us an update every select board meeting. And last night, her update was that the pavilion is complete. There's a punch list of things for the contractor. Apparently, there are some people working with the DPW to look at maybe replanting some of the landscaping. But it's pretty, I would say, okay, if I had to put a percent, I'd say 96% complete.
Sounds good.
Okay. I said 98, so we'll say 97.
Okay.
In connection with this, Paul, I just mentioned that you're wondering, because I've seen the recent signage that has gone up for the recreation area, and it's lovely, nice wooden signs. Paul, you raised the question as to whether there should be a sign there recognizing the contributions of the CPC to this project. We've certainly, and Anne, perhaps before you were running things for us, we were a lot more diligent about putting up signs around town. We actually had quite a budget for the signs for CPC. And I will say, my view generally is, I don't think CPC needs to put up signs for various different projects. I'm reminded of Paul Salucci built this highway kind of signs that would have to get changed out with every governor. But with a project like this, where it's sort of it's not it's been an investment in the town that's it's going to be long-standing, and the CPC was a significant portion of both the acquisition of the land and the development of the park. it seems to me that it might be appropriate to have one of our signs go here. I'll open the floor to get other people's thoughts, and then maybe, Anne, you can tell us whether we've got a sign that we could repurpose and stick there. Sue.
Well, I don't remember how fancy our signs were. I actually walked up there yesterday to check what condition it's in right now and noticed the new sign. I mean, we could, given that we don't want to pollute a nice natural area with lots and lots of big signs, just have a little plaque on one of the posts holding up the new sign saying the CPC funded this in the usual fashion. But I don't know if that would be too subtle for our standard.
Okay, thank you. Eve.
I was actually going to say exactly what Sue said, that we maybe could have a plaque or just even a part of a sign, but not a whole sign. But I also wanted to ask, why is it still listed that there's $500,000 that it's unencumbered and unspent for that project if it's finished?
I think
That is
it's zeroed out, I think, on the chart, isn't it?
zeroed
Oh,
out.
I thought that it wasn't touched yet, not unspent. Oh, no.
No, so these are all zero. This is the grant amounts, and it's been zero for the past 2 years since I've been here. So the money had been spent even before I arrived 2 years ago, but.
I see. Okay, sorry, my bad.
It's just they haven't closed it out because the project's been in some limbo for some period of time. But there
Okay.
were other funding sources, and
So the one of those zeros was a beginning balance, I guess. So there
Yeah.
was no money to spend,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
you know?
Yeah. Paul.
As the person that brought up the sign issue, if we had one that doesn't have to go near the entrance, you could put it near the pavilion
Yeah.
as well. We don't have to clog up the entrance. So there are various places to put it. But I agree with you, given the investment and given the visibility, I think it's appropriate. I don't know what size sign or where it would go, but there's plenty of options.
Yeah, and Paul, it's before you'd send out that email, I've noticed other towns putting up CPC, CPC funded this, and in Acton or other towns like that, in places like this. I mean, I think that would be totally appropriate. A plaque on the side of the pavilion or on the side of the restroom facility or somewhere else. I don't think it needs to compete with the entrance sign that says, the Giroux Recreation Area or anything like that. So, Anne, I guess we don't want to spend a lot of our administrative overhead budget on signage, but if there are signs available or from prior projects, and the like, that we might be able to repurpose here or put here, I think it would be appropriate.
Right, so I had a question. So you're talking about a permanent sign? I know that.
Right, because construction's complete. Yeah, exactly. It would be and I'm sure you've seen some of them around town. We've had some nice permanent signs.
I think we have a few large ones kicking around, but not small ones. The only other granting agency that I can think of that has sort of a permanent sign would be the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And they actually don't require signs, they just require their logo, just to remind people that this is, protected land in perpetuity. Any land that receives that grant is required to display their logo.
Yeah, and this isn't a matter of requirement so much. I think it's part of showing the value of the CPC. Sometimes people call into question whether there should be a separate appropriation process through the CPC, and so there's been some thought by committees in the past that the CPC sort of needs to show what taxpayers are getting for their money. That's sort of under that category, not that it's a requirement. And so I think what we're saying is if there's an ability to have a non-intrusive sign, this would be with the type of project we would want to put it on. It used to be that we would put up at least a temporary sign associated with virtually every project that had a physical presence.
Do we really want to put it on the pavilion, though? I'm not sure we want to claim credit for that very large structure.
I'm just saying, I'm just gonna say somewhere somebody's not gonna trip over it. And a building that would satisfy that requirement. So I'm not, somebody could walk the site and say, hey, I've got a sign, we could stick it here.
Yeah, we
Well,
can.
well, we're gonna be, excuse
Saturday,
me.
yeah,
We're
Saturday.
gonna be there this
Yeah,
weekend.
we'll be walking the site. Why don't we
Yeah.
just look it over when we're there?
Right, that's what I was, that's
All
what I
right,
was about to
Bill, you
say.
bring a can of spray paint and I'll bring a stencil. We'll
I
get it
like that.
done.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's keep plugging. And we may need to bump some things off the agenda so we get through this. So now we've got that was Drinking Fountains, Giroux, Haywood Meadow. This just continues to plug along invasive removals that is sort of drips down year to year. This is a very long-standing project. This is probably the grandfather of grandfathers, FY12. But the idea here, when we've asked Delia about this in the past, because it's been out there for so long, is that this is funding continuing staff combined with volunteer hours to remove invasives. I think this is a really old project, but it's also a small amount of money. So in the balance, it doesn't concern me too much. Does anybody have any thoughts on this one?
Didn't
They're
she
out there, they're out there
Okay.
doing it. I've seen them at it. So I know they continue to do this with volunteers.
Yeah, and
As long as they're continuing to use it up in dribs and drabs, and it isn't just sitting there.
For the purpose it
invasives
was
keep
intended.
growing.
Yep.
Yep.
And we asked Celia about this last year, and she was very clear about the fact that they use they use this resource on a regular basis, so.
Yeah. Okay. And could you scroll down to the next page? All right. Haywood Meadow wall restoration. This is
This is
I'm not
new.
sure on this one.
It's brand new.
Oh, this is a new one.
That's what
Oh,
we-
right. This is a sidewalk that was collapsed. The retaining wall. Great. Okay, so this is going along. Hillcrest Conservation Steps, same bucket. Then we've got the old rifle range. This one, I know a citizen, former member of the select board, has raised specific concerns about this one. Why isn't this happening? Why aren't we getting a trail improved in the old rifle range? And I've got the same question. It's been out there now for 3 years and it hasn't progressed. I think the update was that they were going to be engaging a firm to do this work this summer. And do you happen to know if this has been done, or Bill, if you know?
No, I don't. I've heard discussions around it, but it's true. I've lost touch with it as well. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm surprised.
Okay. All right. So, Anne, this is on our list of things we would want to ask Delia about. I know some people are concerned about this. It's been out there for a long time. The next one, consulting services to update the rec plan. The update on this was more or less, you haven't had time to get around to it. It hasn't been out there that long. This one was one that we need to have an updated rec plan so that we can be eligible for state grants and funding. So I think it's important that it get done, but it's not that old. I don't have any particular concern at this juncture.
Bern, I think it's best characterized as the open space plan because the rec plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I misspeak? Yeah. Open space plan. Oh.
Yeah, see, there's two in a row. Do they fit together?
Well, one is the plan and one is the facilities plan.
No, actually, one is Delia's open space plan and one is the recreation department's facilities, but it's two different departments with two different plans.
Mm.
They do overlap, they do fit together, but the recreation plan was done.
Yeah, they've got $1,000 left in the bucket. Yeah, I recall that. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for clarifying that. So, the latter of which, the recreation facilities plan, that looks like it's essentially done. Maybe there's a little bit of money sitting out there, and after 30 months, we might be asking if they're going to get that spent. That $1,000. The open space and recreation plan, I guess. It was from 2 years ago. So, FY 2020. I'm gonna guess that might be a slight, well, the notation has changed slightly, Anne, in your leftmost columns. So I don't know if that was the when you say 04 FY 24, was that at the 2023 town meeting? Probably, yes.
Right, and the funding is for FY '24.
Right, okay. So it's been out there a year. All right.
And
Yes, Bill.
yeah, I'm sorry. And this is for, I'm thinking what Paul just said. Paul, this is for the or someone, this is for Burton, this is for the open space plan, right? The
Right.
one that's required every 10 years?
Yes,
Is that what
exactly.
it's about?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. And nothing, we haven't organized it at all, as far as I see yet. I mean, we have to get on this.
Yeah, and the update, more or less looked like staff time had not, there hadn't been sufficient staff time to bring this forward.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Now we're coming up to the biggies. We got over $1 million that is, well, now I guess it's probably about $1 million that's sitting there in the bank for Warner's Pond dredging or planning or restoration, depending on
Yeah.
what year it was done in. My view, and that's sort of speaking, it's, the chair, but just my view on this has been, let the money sit there until the task force comes back with its report. But on the other hand, the task force has been working. I don't know if it starts to make sense to say this should be returned back to the committee, and then any future proposal is they're going to be starting with a clean slate and coming back for additional funding. Diane, you've got your hand raised, and I know you were interested.
Yeah, I do, Burton. This is really, I think, an important issue because it dovetails with the complexity of the whole Warner's Pond discourse and what is happening over there. And I think that, I mean, obviously because it's of that pond, but one of the things that I have heard people speculate about legally, and I have not myself done, ask a lawyer, but my understanding is that when the CPC says that something's going to be used for something, that's what it needs to be used for and not something else. A little while ago, I think Burton, you actually said, well, maybe they're going to use it to plant some trees. Well, whatever that project was we were discussing is, can they do that? Was that part of their original proposal? Or do they have to come back to the CPC and make an emendation to their proposal of which we could approve, which was not more money, but just in terms of the development of a project. And I think we're going to hear a lot about that very fine line when we come to this project, because I'm already hearing about it from all sorts of people. I suspect Bill and others are as well. So
yeah, I've certainly been buttonholed on this, and it's interesting that I've oftentimes I've had people approach me, sometimes at town meeting or at Crosby's or whatever, asking about this, and they say, "Isn't the money supposed to be spent for dredging?
that's right.
Isn't that what we're doing?" And the answer to that is, for the first and second grants, yes. The third grant was changed to be for essentially coming up with ecological improvements to the pond. And it was changed very specifically to address the fact that the dredging was going sideways on us because of the costs associated with that. And that's where the funds that have been spent to date, my understanding, have come from, is that third grant. And when I put the question to the people, well, if you're saying that it's got to be spent specifically for dredging, and right now they're not dredging, so would you like us to withdraw the dredging money? It's generally the pro-dredging people who say, oh, that's the consequence? No, don't pull back the money.
I'd like to speak to, Paul, do you want to speak to it first? Because I think
Well, just from a CPC perspective, you can talk about the task force. I thought we had agreed before that we would hold this money pending whether it was going to be used for dredging. And if it wasn't going to be used for dredging, if there was dam removal, then we would have to pull it back and there'd be a reapplication. I think we had that conversation. So that's still,
yes, we have.
As Bill will tell you, that hasn't been resolved yet, and possibly by the end of the year we'll have an answer, but we don't know. You're right on that last line. That's a little bit more open-ended. I know Dealey's spending that money to look at various options for restoration, which don't necessarily focus on dredging. So I think you defined that correctly. So now I'll defer to Bill.
All right, yeah, thanks. I like just a few words about this. The task force, maybe you've heard this already, we've divided into 3 work groups. And if you know this already, one work group is looking at dredging, because we know now that we've also procured a site on the Department of Corrections land adjacent to Route 2, where we could in fact put the sediment from dredging. That should lower the price significantly if that works through. So that's a really significant group that's working. We'll find out what happens. The second group is looking at dam removal, and even they are talking about dredging. Now that's something which I don't think the people who often stop you and collar you and in the
You're
supermarket
right.
think about. They don't. But that's something that group has been suggesting, that they dredge for a couple of reasons. One is, again, for removal of invasives, but also to bring the channel of the stream to go exactly where we want it to go, and to in fact make Scout Island accessible to the Boy Scouts. So that's a discussion. The only one that does not include dredging is the third group, which is looking at the short-term not short term, but sort of intermediate possibilities of a drawdown, for example, to get rid of the invasive species.
Mhm.
And that third group is thinking that it's not saying there won't be a proposal for dredging in the future. There may very well, or there may very well be a proposal for dam removal and other things. So that may come up, and that third bucket may be significant for some of those other areas. For example, let's say the dam stays up and dredging is not done, but we're going to try other methods to reduce the invasives. We may also want to look at a fish passage, which is one of the big things that people who have been suggesting we open up the dam are interested in.
Right.
So that may be an issue. The other issue is this is probably get more technical than you want to know. If we decided that a drawdown may work for the pond, we would draw the water down in the late fall into the early winter, and then fill it back up again in April. If we did that, it's possible that the sluice gate that's in the dam is not large enough, and we may have to get that larger. And that also we might, I don't know if that third bucket of money is available for that. But those are the three things that are being considered. And I'd say that at least two of the major proposals that are being considered do include dredging. So it's good to let the money sit there for now. I think it would really upset a lot of our working, well, at least our direction.
And I see some hands raised, but Bill, if I can just ask one question, do you see a rough timeline for when we think we will get a consolidated feedback that comes out of the task force? And maybe, I guess, and maybe describe, is the task force going to make a recommendation to the select board, or how does that, what's the outcome of all that?
Well, it's
great
going
work?
to, they'll make it to the Natural Resources Commission. That's the
Okay.
way it was set up.
Okay.
And then they will go from there. I suspect our hope was we would have this done by December. I don't
Okay.
think we're going to make that deadline. So, but I think we'll have it. But I actually, though, Diane, I don't think it's that far off. Frankly,
Oh, good.
it's a matter of getting some financial estimates,
Okay.
which is really going to slow the process down for us.
Got you.
It's not that we won't be able to get to a point of
To a consensus, right?
having a priority list of what we think ought to be done or how it ought to be done.
Right.
So I'm actually I've been impressed with the way people have been working on this.
Well,
So-
I'm
Okay.
impressed. I'm impressed as well by what you're saying, Bill. That's really very reassuring.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of smart people are involved in that. Paul, you've got your hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, back to the CPC, what we do with the money. So my strict constructionist interpretation here is if the recommendation is indeed to dredge, then that money is used for dredging. But any other project, even a hybrid project,
That's right.
is not a dredging project. They may contain dredging. So, I mean, I think that would require a new application, which might include dredging. I don't want to predetermine that, but I'm just the interpretation of what the task force is doing. Even if the dam removal would have dredging, that's a different project. The project that we funded is a dredging project. And so let's see
Yeah.
where it goes, but we'll have to make the decision at that point what to do with the money.
Yeah, for the bulk of the money, right?
Wait a minute, you're saying that even if there was a hybrid project and it used up the full amount of the money for dredging on dredging and then more money on some other part, they still couldn't use it for the dredging part?
Well, we'd have to decide that. It's a different project. I mean,
I think we'd need to look at the scope of the original application and the
right.
original grant agreements, right? Because if the original grant agreement said dredging the full pond or portions as determined by, the right, because I think Bill, what you were referring to was they might dredge in front of Giroux Park, they might dredge that channel and do a partial dredging. I know Delia was talking about that some 18 months ago or something like that. If that fell within the scope of the original application and that's what all the money went to, well, we could discuss it when they come forward in terms of
Yeah.
how well
Yeah.
it fits within the grant or
So
the
I don't know,
MOU.
that's just sort of a personal opinion. We have a lot to discuss when Bill delivers his report.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's the question of how, of the public perception of
Yeah.
the integrity of the committee. And so
Yeah.
that's, we need to be supportive of the work that Bill's committee is doing and everything else, but at the same time, and respectful. But at the same time, we also need to be true to the original intentions and make certain that what I have a question, we have these deadlines and we say, oh, the deadline has to be met by this and by November 1st. Toward the committee to come forward with an understanding of what they'd like to do. And they had a really consensus about a solution. And it was going to require a little bit money or the rejiggering of one of their applications. Is it absolutely legally impossible for us to accept a late application? I'd like to understand that.
So that came up in another question, Diane,
I remember.
with somebody who sort of came up just this cycle saying, "Oh,
Oh, okay.
we might have wanted to get in an application," and Anne did a little bit of digging under what circumstances we would accept late applications, and we can accept late applications in somewhat extraordinary circumstances, such
right.
as the opportunity to purchase land. That that there was a window that would open and close could happen. I don't have the exact language in front of me, but Anne looked at that. It's pretty limited, at
Okay.
least in and Anne, were you pulling that language from the CPC plan?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was the plan or the procedure manual. It must have been the procedure manual, actually.
Okay. Well, I attended that boot camp, as did Eve this this summer, and I thought that I thought that ours was a pretty strict constructionism in comparison to somehow how other places tended to behave. So I'm just throwing that out there, not encouraging that we spend more money, for something, but just to amend an application. It seems to me we might be a little bit more flexible, but.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking at, Diane, especially if it's an amendment to an application. The money's already banked there. It's not taking away resources from a current applicant, things like that. We might look at what that process looks like.
Because otherwise it would send the project, to 2.5 years from now rather than now. Because to get a town, first they'd have to have an application and then, well, 1.5 years from.
Yeah, though keeping in mind, there is that bucket of money that's just sort of much more general. And I've got to guess that whatever plan they come up with is going to have a heck of a permitting process, right? That's going to take some time to get through before any construction funds are needed. But I'm sorry, John, I interrupted you.
Oh, just that we've amended some other folks' applications. We've done it in the past.
Oh, we have?
Sure. Robin's house, we agreed to a change.
Okay. All right. Was that an application or was that an existing grant?
Existing grant.
Okay. All right. Bill.
Oh, no, that's,
okay.
I think I'm all set.
Okay.
I know. One thing I was going to say, this is not a catastrophe in the pond. I mean, it's filling up and all that, but it's not like it's something that has to be done right now. And
Okay.
I mean, no matter which thing we follow up on, it's okay. It takes longer than it takes a little longer. That's fine.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, Anne, do you want to throw back the table back up on the screen? And guys, I'm cognizant that we're at 8:40. I'm not losing track of time. I think we're going to have to bump a couple of items off the agenda item, but this is really
Two
good to
more,
get
you
through
got
this.
2 more pages to go.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully I think we get into some of the closed out projects. So White Pond Slope Restoration, this one, 95% complete, seems to be moving along. I have actually gone and walked some of this property. There's some very significant improvements to the slope. This is an older project and I think this is more or less punch work ongoing and ongoing signage and things like that. The next one, the APOD program. This one is pending 0% complete. I guess this is but this is from last year. Brings us into historic preservation. The Cemetery Stone Wall project. This is FY24 in progress. It looks like some money's been expended, but it's moving along. I'm going to read through these ones that are more recent, and if anybody has any particular concerns, please interrupt. 51 Walden Street. This is, I'm sure they're spending this money as fast as they can. This was a project that I suggested they wanted to spend the money before town meeting. Maybe they just haven't submitted their receipts on this yet. Cemetery Wall Stone Restoration Project. Is this a repeat? Do we have this in here twice? It looks like we do. And the first line in blue and the third line in blue, I think, is the same.
Sorry, I'll fix that.
Okay. The next one, the Cemetery Metal Structures Project. This was from just last year, so this money hasn't been expended yet, but we all are familiar with that. Civil War Soldiers Monument, some progress. I was actually curious, Ann, do you know what they've done? Is this relatively small amount of money? I haven't seen any construction at the obelisk. Is this like they've had the plaque redone, or do you know what's the progress has been? We don't have a report on this one.
Right, I haven't heard recently, but I know that they were, they had to cast the plaque first.
Okay, that's the breakdown of costs here looks like that would be roughly it, and then repointing or whatever the additional work. So that brings us to the next page. Concord Arts, this one I'm going to guess is receipts haven't been submitted. I think there's ongoing work going on there. I haven't been by there for a few months, but I'm guessing that's progressing. The Historic Preservation Plan. Anne, do you want to just fill us in on this one? This is yours.
Sure, yes, so we hired a consultant, we've been working with them, phase 1 is complete, that was for information gathering. We also received a grant from Mass Historical Commission as matching funds, so we met with MHC and they're sort of walking us through the whole thing. Phase 2 is just about complete, which is the public outreach phase. We did a community-wide survey and we had 350 respondents.
Oh,
and
wow.
each person spent over 45 minutes filling out the survey. I couldn't believe it, just
That's
how
amazing.
engaged this community really is. So fairly soon we'll be done with done with phase 2, and we'll really dig into the writing of the plan. So we're looking forward to that. That's the part we
Wonderful. And then the next one I think is you could also speak to preservation survey of a preservation survey of pre-1775 structures.
Right. Well, the previous project is taking longer than anticipated, and I don't want to overcommit myself. So we're trying to get further along with the preservation project before launching another project.
Okay. The next one, I don't have any particular concerns about, except that I think some of these historic documents that are being preserved were tended to be displayed next year. So Diane, I hope your committee is the 250 committee is on top of this. We'll have the opportunity on Saturday, I'm sure, to ask the archivist where this stands when we go to the library.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think he's terrific. And I think the intentionality of making these things very visible in the library is going forward wisely and efficiently.
Okay, great. Scout House floor, that was a FY25 project. And same with the Robbins house. So it's no red flags there for me.
So, and the floor project is actually complete. They just.
Oh, it
submitted-
is.
I was gonna
Okay.
say, I think they've done the floor, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Great. 110 Walden Street. Oh, this is Concord Home for the Aged. What's the name of this house? I never think of it as a Concord Home for the Aged. Um,
Oh,
Oh.
We're
we
all
all know what
stuck.
it is.
No, we know,
It's
we
all-
all,
We
yes,
don't know
we
what
all
it is,
know.
and where it is, we just, yeah.
Yeah, with the big columns.
Pillars
Yeah.
are,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's nearing completion. I guess. Anne, is this just? I mean, this has been out there for a little while. Is they just not requested reimbursement?
that's right. They haven't requested reimbursement and they haven't submitted a lot of the documents that were required. So I've been in touch with her. quite
Okay.
a few times. We're still waiting.
Okay.
Hmm.
And as I recall correctly, this was the second grant that they had, second or third.
Third,
Um,
third,
It was
third.
the third, I think, right?
third.
Yeah. I think in response to our previous feedback, which was you guys need to do more and ask for more. This building's a jewel and it's going to fall down. I imagine the work's been done, but if it's a paperwork issue, I appreciate you, Ann, following up with them on that. The Wheeler Harrington House and Land, this was over at the property on Harrington Street. Did I see something recently about this, maybe requesting new grant funding to assess this, or was this using this land, or this grant? And I thought I saw somewhere in like maybe a select board meeting package, and don't ask why I go and read those on occasion, but I do, that there was some thought about getting a study done on the Wheeler Harrington property. And I thought to myself, didn't we just recently fund that? You,
Okay, so Mary may be wanting to speak about this. The staff is going to be meeting tomorrow morning about, different options for the future of the Harrington House at the request of the select board. I know that there is existing funding in facilities budget. And so rather than apply for additional CPC funding to create, new studies, there was a series of studies done, I think in 2016. I think there were 4 different extensive studies done at that point. So rather than repeat some work of the past, I think the facilities manager will be, targeting very specific studies of,
so what do we think is going to happen with this money? Are they not going to do hire a consultant to assist with public outreach?
That's above my pay grade. We will.
Okay.
The meeting tomorrow.
Okay. I guess before we put this in the bucket of things we'd like somebody from the town to report back on, if you can sort of get, in your meeting, figure out where this is going and report back to us informally on this. This is one where I remember the original grant was somewhat on the heels of a prior study grant, and nothing's really seemed to have happened since 2021. So I'd just be curious about this. It's not a big pile of money, but
Who would we ask about this one? If we wanted some sort of a personal appearance.
Megan Zamudo is organizing the group tomorrow.
Okay.
At the request of the select board.
Okay. And all right, so thank you. You could maybe grab some information for us on that. The next two on the right tavern, it looks like both, well, the first one is in progress. The second one will be coming. It looks like they've done some exploratory, based upon the update, received some exploratory work and doing some assessment and the like. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this one?
They've received a grant for $500,000 to continue to work on the development of Right Tavern. A substantial grant, and they're working with a firm with designs that are really exciting, actually. This is an example. We were always worried, and it was suggested we be cautious about the fact it may never actually really be a museum. But it's going to be a museum, and they've got the money to make it happen, and it's pretty exciting. So
I was hoping it'd be turned back into a tavern.
Oh, it's going to be.
You're gonna get both museum and a tavern.
That's
Oh,
exactly
really?
right. Yes. Yep.
Wonderful.
The
Wonderful.
problem is a liquor license, but once, that's never a problem, right?
They've had some wonderful events just recently.
Oh, lots of them, yeah.
That is terrific. Okay.
Well, that's
Not
pretty great, but in line with what we've said about some other projects, the first of their two grants is starting to get a little old, and I wonder why they don't close that one out now that they have more money to work with. I'm just curious about that.
We should find out.
I didn't go through very closely, Sue, their update, other than to see that they'd done some very minor demolition, doing some exploration. Like I just remember a couple points from it. But maybe they're just not more than $260,000 or $230,000 into the project. Eve.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, isn't that the same as the other one where that first zero means that that's how much money there was in the beginning of the year, which means that it's an old project and
Oh,
it's-
yes, you're absolutely
Oh, I
right.
see. Yes, it's that they haven't reported it's complete, but it is.
However, their preservation restriction is not yet in place, and that was a requirement of the grant.
I
So
see.
these lower-
So it's paperwork. The money's been leveraged, but they've got to get that done.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Eve. I will admit, and these tables are a little hard to read when we don't bring down the heading on each page. And actually it might be helpful to get these like as a spreadsheet or something so that we can, anyway, just a little hard to read as a scan. All right, that brings us through all of the pending projects. I don't think we need to go through the completed projects unless anybody has any specific comments.
We got no money back, right? They're just complete.
Oh, no, there was one down there, John. Good point. There was one that was highlighted. I think we've sort of already accounted for it. Well, it's gone away, but I'm just looking.
Oh, yeah, under other funds, project funds returned to the CPC general fund in fiscal year 23.
They're not in the 2025 report, but in the 2023 report, there was $201 related to the Concord Oral History Preservation and Access Project. It looks like that's probably being returned. And then there was a $240,000 for the Commonwealth Avenue project for Concord Housing Authority. And you had highlighted those in yellow in the 2024 report, which I took to mean those funds would be returned to the committee.
Right, can you see my screen? They are down here on the last line. They're just combined into this single.
Oh, okay, right.
They're both returned to the CPC general fund in FY24.
There we go. In FY24, so they were returned to, but they would be, those funds would be available for this funding cycle, right?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
since John and I think that's true, it must be.
There we go. There we go. All right. So we spent a lot of time on item 4, which is the project status updates. One of our standing items is a review of the updated community preservation plan. We do this every year around this time. I'm going to suggest that we don't crack into that this evening since we're coming up at 9 o'clock. Diana, I know you're a night owl. I am not. Just one question I had on the plan, and is that the same font we've always used in the past, or did we change fonts?
I don't know, I'll have to check it.
Because I found the font challenging. Not to be persnickety, but I found it challenging.
I agree. I mean, I tried to read through it. I mean, I actually did, but I mean, it would be easy to just, control all and change font.
And I don't remember that in years past. And that's kind of thing that I remember. I also think that just as one quick comment, that the listing of the committee members at the beginning of it needs to be updated from the prior year.
Right.
Unless anybody else has any quick high-level comments, maybe we'll move on to. Yeah,
Can we
go
pick, Anne, can we get a copy, a printed copy at the office?
Yes, I can print one out if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Stop by. Sure.
That would
Thank
be
you.
great. Would
that
anybody
would
else
be-
like a printed copy?
I would. I think I find it hard to read it online. I mean,
Yeah.
I would prefer it if I had a paper.
Yeah, especially with just the length of the document. Okay, so
I
2
am
copies.
giving it a close read. I'm only up to page 14, but I'm finding the usual little things, but then some things that might be worthy of notice, but I'm not
All,
even halfway through.
all feedback is appreciated, Sue.
And you are the world's best editor. If I'm ever going to publish something, I'm going to pay you to read it.
Well, I got all upset about one thing, but then I looked up and it turns out that it's a problem in state law, so it's not our problem. Apparently the CPA allows us to create historic resources.
Oh,
Uh-huh. How do you
okay.
create something that's already historic?
Well, that's
Interesting thought.
one question, Anne, just going by the file path name. It looked like this had planning board updates to it, and maybe Sue, is that true, or was that? I remember last year the planning board provided some feedback. Were any changes made to this document, or are we looking at essentially the existing plan document to decide if we need updates?
There were edits from the previous year, but this happened before last Tuesday, so of course I don't remember because I never remember anything that happened before last Tuesday. I recognize those edits, but I don't know if I provided them or if the planning board collectively provided them or if they came from someplace else entirely.
Okay, and this version we're looking at doesn't have any new changes. Is that correct?
I think Paul actually did provide a few changes to the rec section, right? And it was just referencing the various plans, so I updated that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Liz Rust had provided updates to the the housing section quite a while ago. So
Okay.
and I think they're
Okay.
Do you want us to come by and get a copy of that?
Sure.
Okay, by your office and pick it up. Okay.
And maybe nobody else appreciates this, but the lawyer in me, I look when I'm updating a document like this, I love to redline it so that I know what's being changed and what's being edited, so people can quickly go to things where people have provided input. Other people, think red lines, are a pain to deal with, but that's very helpful. And maybe what we can do is, as you collect more feedback at some point in time, we could do essentially a comparison of the 2 documents. And if you need any help doing that, that's kind of unfortunately my bread and butter, so I could help you with that. Okay.
I want to
If
say
I
I'm
may,
so glad it's not mine, but bread and butter.
yeah,
Okay.
the
You
things we end
go.
up doing. If I may, then I would say let's essentially table further input on that and move it to our next agenda, our next meeting agenda to get to. But let's go ahead and knock out the minutes that were from the June meeting. Does anybody have any edits that have not been previously submitted to the minutes that
I
are
think
as
I had
posted?
3 punctuation marks and it said "an unique" instead of "a unique," which I sent to Anne earlier today or yesterday, but I mean they were obviously not substantive in any way, shape, or form.
We will consider those friendly edits. And so accepted. Does anybody else have any comments? If not, I'll just ask for a motion to approve the minutes of
I move to approve the minutes.
A
June
second.
11th. Thank you very much. We've got a second. I'll do a quick roll call vote here, starting with you, Eve.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Sue,
I
John,
Yes.
Diane,
Aye.
Bill.
I wasn't there, so I don't think I can vote.
yes,
Well,
you can.
actually
I
you actually
can,
can,
okay.
but if you prefer to abstain.
Yes, no, I vote aye, yes.
Okay, Paul.
Yes.
All right. Those minutes pass unanimously. Boy, I'm starting to get tired here. All right. With that, I guess we've moved through all our agenda items. We've got Linda still on the line. Linda, do you have any public comment for us?
No, thank you. I'm just continuing to follow with great interest. So thanks for all your work.
Oh, you bet, Linda. Thanks for following along.
It's wonderful to have you on board.
Yes. All right. So 9 o'clock. Oh, John, yes.
Yeah, do we have a schedule for the fall?
Oh, you mean for our meetings
Yeah.
through the fall? Anne.
I thought we did.
Yes, it's up on the website.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anne,
Okay.
would you do everybody a favor and send that around to the committee? Just so people can make certain that we know what is anticipated.
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank
Thanks so
you
much, Anne.
much.
And with that, I will see you all hopefully Saturday morning at 9 o'clock at the library gathering. I guess we'll probably be all parking at the umbrella, and then not the umbrella. Yes,
Yeah,
it's the
the
umbrella.
Public parking next to the
and,
umbrella.
and the public parking next to the umbrella. So ever the scrivener, correct, being very precise. Yes. There.
That was a public service because many people don't know it's public parking because there's no signage to that effect.
Yeah. Well, also funded by the CPC at some point, I think some of that. So we'll see you guys Saturday morning, relatively bright, relatively early for the archives. See you all. And with that, we can adjourn.